48-hour art check, round 80.
Yeah. Unfortunate events. So you can start calling me Lemony Stickit.
Yeah. Was it on the on the freeway?
Yeah, but it's a slow flat, so it's not like a huge deal.
Oh,
but
okay.
It just slowed me down because it had to stop and get air and yeah. So it wasn't a blowout. That would have sucked because it's been raining lately, so that would have been disastrous. But
I broke down blocking 2 lanes of traffic on the 405. And it was in this, I borrowed a truck from my cousin, and it was like one of those giant, like I think they call it a half ton or something. Like one of those trucks that you can't move. Like a car, like I could push it, you know. This was like, it was on a slight incline, and so I could go backwards against traffic, which wasn't going to happen, or forwards with power, and so I just sat there, and it was terrible. It was the worst.
Oh man. Oh, okay, good. Okay, cool. So Adam Laurie's in the chats, and he said he wasn't hearing audio, but then he corrected and said, "Oh, it just came in, so never mind."
Oh, good.
I guess
good.
our audio might have been cutting out, but I'm glad you're hearing us clear and welcome, Adam. It's been a while. It's nice to see you.
Yeah, that's awesome.
All right.
Okay, so let's do it. Shall we jump in?
Yeah. Before we jump in, like, share, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, but sharing really helps get this out so we can have like a full chat right after the check when we get into our topic.
Yeah, we switched back to original. I thought it would be better to do the art check at the end, and then a bunch of people were like, no, the art check gives me time to like get in before you guys get the topic. And so if you guys that are watching share this on whatever social media platforms you got, or you could like call friends on the phone, let them know, you know, however you want to share it. Then by the time people jump on, we'll be finishing up the art check and we jump into the topic, which is kind of fun. So cool. Yeah. Okay, so let's start with what progress have you done in the last 48 hours?
Okay, so I think I hit the mark, because I think the last time I was hoping that I'd get this second panel and third panel, or like basically, I don't even remember the panel number. I guess it's the 4th and 5th panel.
Yeah.
Rough penciled, and I hit just that. So I was kind of hoping that I might beat it, but this is what I kind of expected to have done, which considering all the craziness, I feel pretty good, and I'll be a little ahead tonight. So that's exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's looking good, and I agree with what you said last time that you don't normally get to do action. And you can like feel that hit. That's a hard thing to do in comics, is to convey the physicality of an impact. And I think you nailed it there. It's kind of cool.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a few like wonky anatomy things, like his left leg is going to need a little work, and I'm going to need to clarify the silhouette a little bit on the bottom left corner, but that's the advantage of having kind of rough and then tighter pencils.
Right.
So like the tight pencils can be kind of correcting a few of those things where I like the vibe of it, but I just like also would like that like left leg not to look like it's dislocated.
Right.
So it's like, you know, the beauty is you get that kind of rough movement. And what's weird is I'm calling this rough pencils, but you know how this works. It's like this is kind of tighter pencils from rough pencils, and then from that point, I'm going to do the polished pencils that I can then ink over. And I advocate for that all the time. Like, you try to nail it perfectly from the get go, and unless you're like an absolute master, I think that would be difficult. So
Right.
yeah.
That Kim
All right,
G guy.
Yeah, dude, that guy. The only disadvantage of that is then every artist alive hates you.
Right. I still think he's some sort of warlock or something. I just
Yeah,
but
for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's like you start thinking maybe these like things about Krypton are not so much myths.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. So, with me, I have started my 18 days of animation where I'm going to do animation. So I got my initial rough sketch storyboards done. These aren't full storyboards. And then I was experimenting with how tentacles move. And I did that without actually watching tentacles move. So then I studied a bunch of video footage of squids and cuttlefish and octopus and realized that I don't know how to do that because they curl in a way that is much more three-dimensional than my typical flat style of animation. And so it actually brings it into a realm that I don't know how to do. And so, and this is kind of my pitch for doing stuff like this is if I didn't have a project with a goal, I would never learn what I'm going to be forced to learn to make these tentacles work the way I want them to.
Yes.
And that's why I think everybody should have a comic or an animation or some sort of project where they're like, literally what's happening to me right now is, oh crap, I literally have no idea how I would even begin to do that. And I will figure it out. Because I have to.
Yeah, and I think the catch is, if this were just like a deadline tight, like results driven thing, where maybe you had like a day to do it, there would be probably a practical reason to go with what works.
Right.
But because it's a personal project, it's like you can actually force yourself. Like, I mean, on deadline, you still will have moments where you have to. But in this case, since it's a personal project and it's going to look that much cooler.
Right.
And you're the guy coming up with the time budget, you can make that call of actually holding to a higher standard and being like, dude, I'm going to make that happen. I'm going to learn that thing.
Right.
And then I got another thing in my tool belt. So it's like, anyhow, we're extending the check too long, but I just, I'm excited because I think you're going to level up from it. And I will say I've never had a comic, even this last page, some of that, like, how do I make a hit feel like a hit? That took a while, and it's stupid that it took so long, but it did. It took a lot of iterations, and then it was like, okay, that works. Now I know how to do that. I don't know if I've done that one before.
Yeah, and I think that's the real value because I think it. Now I'm going to forget. I think it was Marshall Lee that just posted a video about the best way to learn how to draw. If it isn't, he's got a great YouTube channel, and I apologize if it's not him, but I'm pretty sure it's him. And it was just do comics because instead of learning I'm going to learn how to draw faces, I'm going to learn how to draw trees or whatever. Like, you have to figure out how to draw whatever the story calls for. Like, you have to, and that's just the value of projects rather than practice, because practice comes from having to do it. I have to do this thing. Like, literally, this tentacle thing is so hard right now in the way that I saw the way that they move. Because what it is they have an underside that has suckers, and then they've got the other side. And typically in a still 2D drawing, you can just choose, 3/4, front, side, or whatever.
Yeah.
But the way that they move is they're rotating their tentacles as they unfold, and they unfold in reverse. So they flip backwards so that they got sucker side out, which means
Yeah.
that I not only have, you know, some large number of ellipses that are going to go in perspective, but also this tube that is tapering to a point that unrolls. And
Yeah.
up until this point, the only thing I've done is flat things that are articulated or bent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In two dimensions, and I can do 2.5D where I spread those out in Z space, but it's still just like two-dimensional objects in three-dimensional space.
Yeah.
This may be. I'm thinking of several different ways that I could do it, but it may actually have to do a little bit of 3D or a little bit of frame by frame, like rotoscoping traditional animation. I'm not sure which one.
Yeah. Well, I
But
would say like regardless of the trick, even if there's a trick to it, it's going to be getting a lot closer to like full animation. Like you're
right,
moving at like doing a movement like that. The second you mentioned folding out, like, and the just the visual of that, I was like, oh, you're going to be dipping into like full animation. At that
yeah,
point, you're dipping into, even if it's brief, it'll be full animation. That's really interesting. So
yeah,
that's going to be, I'm excited for that because I think you're going to learn a ton. And then
yeah.
in turn, because you're so good at kind of sharing it, and kind of teaching people what you learn through these wacky projects, um, like everyone will level up from it. So that I think that's really exciting. And like once again, totally second that because I've heard that, like Doug Tenopple, I remember one time was talking about when he first started working for gaming and had to do animation, he thought he was really good at drawing until he had to turn figures around
Right,
and realized how inconsistent his models were and how
right.
bad his anatomy was. And like, he was like, if there's anything that makes you realize how bad you are at drawing, it's animation because you
Yeah,
have to move that thing. And so now you're like, oh, like the arms looked great like this, but now when they're down, they're touching the floor, and that doesn't work for movement.
yeah,
So it's like you're forced, like by default, to learn anatomy a little better and like how to kind of break things down into like cylinders and cubes. And um, I would say that's totally true from my experience with any comic project, where it's like I will feel like I know how to draw stuff, and especially your own written project, because you will write things if you're being really fair and you're not, don't cheat yourself and pick the thing that you're like, this will be easy to draw.
yeah,
Like, write a story you want to write, and what you'll find is you yourself include crowd scenes and you're like, why the hell did I do this?
yeah.
And it's because it's that Neil Gaiman thing of like the taste. Anyhow, we got to get through the check, but it is that Neil Gaiman thing of like we have the taste inherently in us as designers. It's what got us into design and illustration in the first place. So it's just like then the skill has to match the taste,
Oh, that's Ira Glass.
Oh, that was Ira Glass. That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
It's a great quote.
I Yeah, and that's totally true. And when it's your own project and you really care about it and you're owning it, it's like that's usually the time where your taste and your skill, if it's not going to reach your taste because it's your own thing, it's like you're going to just work at it until you get there because it's your own thing. Your name's on it.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, so that's exciting, man.
yeah. So yeah, that was a little bit of my challenge, but also my challenge was kind of what I did today.
Yes.
I did these. I did all this stuff yesterday, and then today I was like, "Oh, that's wrong." Because if you look in the lower left-hand corner, that's not how tentacles move. That's how a thick rope might act, but it's not how a
Yeah,
tentacle moves. So anyway, but yeah. So
I'm excited.
how about challenges?
Not much to say other than the same challenges, and just life challenges. But
Yeah,
but what's interesting is, and this does act as a testament to our art check, and you guys can go back and watch our last one if you want after this. But the conclusion we came to like really has kind of helped me get through the week because I am constantly trying to remember just like what an I should say what an existential threat making art is.
yeah,
And I think that's cool, and like like I do want to remember that, like on a daily basis, like how fortunate any of us are to be getting away with this, you know,
Yeah.
like getting away with like making stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It's we're flying in the face of the system.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I got some work done yesterday during lunch. I intended to get some work done last night, and I don't know if this is stress induced or whatever, but I sat down in a reclining chair after dinner and then woke up at 2 a.m. So I lost my evening. So that was gone, and then just a little bit of more of the same. And then real challenges, kind of what I've already talked about. I've run into a major obstacle in this project, and so the challenge of that is going to occupy most of my brain's downtime until that problem is solved, and I'm feeling that it's cranking. I even came up with another solution while I was paying attention to what you were saying. I wasn't ignoring you, but it was. I figured out another way that I think I could do it. So that's just one of those things that I also really like about this is you can once you introduce a challenge to your brain will work on that challenge when you are not being entertained.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of a double-edged sword of you should carve out time to allow your brain some time to think, and then also you should
Yeah.
introduce challenges so that you can solve those problems. So yeah, so that was kind of my challenge. How about plans? What are your plans for the next couple days for the weekend?
So I'm gonna finish the rough pencils this weekend. So that's my one plan. My other is just to continue trying to kind of seek solutions to problems because that's what we do as creatives. And really, like the cool thing about tackling like a comic or anything like that is it's like an exercise for life in a weird way.
Yeah,
So it's like you present yourself with these impossible challenges and you figure out methods and ways to do it, and then after that, ways to do it more efficiently and more efficiently. So to me, it's like you know that's going to be my goal to try to kind of stay optimistic, positive, and get crap done. So
yeah, awesome. I have started a daily project, so I will make a video tonight. I will make a video tomorrow, and I will make a video Sunday of my progress. And basically, I'm going to get an hour minimum of work every day in on this animation. And so I'm going with rough sketches, storyboards, animatic, um, rough animation, and then animation. And so I don't believe I'll get to an animatic before Monday, but I want to get all of my storyboards really fleshed out before Monday. And so I want to be at the animatic stage by Monday. So that's kind of where I'll be.
cool. I think that's huge, and that's going to be fun to watch. So
Yeah.
definitely, you guys stay tuned on Corey's channel, and I'm sure you'll be sharing that. Share that with the hundreds too, man, because
Yeah, I
it's
should.
close enough. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I already released my first video this afternoon. So it's kind of my day one.
Yeah.
All
I'm
right.
excited, man. That's a huge launch.
Yeah.
And commitment, which is huge. That's half the thinking on this thing. It's good to publicly commit to stuff because you find that, like, especially if you're a proud person like us, you will stick to it.
It's
So,
true.
yeah. All right.
Yeah. So topic. Uh,
Um,
I was
yeah.
thinking. I was thinking one of the two things. Unless you've got something. Mine
No,
are.
go. Go.
I was thinking it might be good now that we're doing the podcast and we've got a dozen episodes of that up, and we're 80 in, to just talk about how to do an art check and the benefits of each stage. I thought that might be an
Yes.
interesting one.
Yeah.
You want to do that one?
Yeah. Why not?
Okay.
And then the other definitely include on the Trello so we don't miss it too. Um, Yeah, that's great. So the ins- let's get into how to do an art check and why we do art checks. So this whole thing originated with
Before we
a.
get started,
Oh
let's
yeah.
do the podcast intro.
Oh yes. Yeah.
Okay, and then I'll let you kick it off. Um,
Go.
all right, I always gotta like get ready. This is my
Mhm.
game face here. 48-hour art check, best of podcast. We go live on YouTube every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 9 p.m. California time. And we take the best conversations from that and rip it and put it to this podcast. That's what you're listening to now. If you'd like to join us live in the chat, then you can hit us up at corykerr.com/48hr, and you can see the YouTube channels that we go live on. Today's episode, we are actually going to talk about the art check itself, what it is, how you do it, and why we do it in particular.
Yeah, and if as we're going, you have questions, for the live show, please feel free to chime in on the chats and stuff and ask us anything about the 48-hour art check, and we'll answer it. So I'm gonna just kick it off by saying like how we kind of started this whole thing. I'll probably let Cory run through the specific questions we ask because he has just a much better memory than I do, and I'll paraphrase, he'll phrase, and that to me is like is one of the most awesome things about Cory. He's got like the best memory. So anyhow, so basically Cory and I like started hanging out because of Artcasters, and we're mutual friends with Scott Cirkland, and we had Cory on Artcasters, which is a show we do every other week that alternates on Scott and my channel. And Cory and I kind of clicked, and we're both creatives, and we both like comics, and we're both like nerds for like existentialism and philosophy and history and stuff. So we would chat occasionally late at night when one of us like both of us were stupidly not sleeping and working on these stupid crazy projects. And one day it was like 2 or 3 in the morning, and we're kind of lucidly talking as you do at 3 in the morning when you're just kind of in the zone creating stuff. But we were talking about projects we're working on and trying to keep motivated on these goals that seem really unattainable, and the hundreds, which we've both done in different iterations, and how that was beneficial, and just randomly got this idea of like starting like an accountability group where it would be like, two creatives that are trying to accomplish a goal, like holding each other accountable to that goal. And then it just went back and forth to like, well, would it be like the 100 days? And we're like, no, it couldn't be like the 100 days because it would have to function in the accountability way, be like a really consistent thing. And Cory had brought up the idea of streaming it, because he was figuring out this new. Well, you can explain the stream part as we get into that. But the goal, that was the impetus, was like, wouldn't this be cool? Someone should do it. And that's where I think both of us are like similar personalities of like, anytime that's said, that usually means there's something to it.
Right.
Um, whenever I would be doing graphic design, if I came up with a concept like, oh, like it has to have been done because like it's just too good, like somebody must have done this and nobody's doing it, that would be a really good sign that that's the design you should do.
Yeah.
And so to me, I was like, okay, let's do it. Cory committed to it. We collaborated, built this animation and stuff as an intro, but at its core, literally, like, we've kind of structured it in a way that anyone could join in and do. So why don't you explain a little bit of like what the core questions are that kind of drive this thing? Maybe we can get into the intention of those questions,
Yeah.
and then we
So
can do a little bit about like the benefits.
yeah, and so there's three quick questions, and they're really easy, and they're at the beginning of every video. So if you're listening to this later, you can go back and watch those videos, and it just goes through all three questions and kind of some specifics. But basically, and I actually, I'm going to play that right now. So let's do that. And so the first Pressing that button mutes everything. Okay, we're back. Sorry, I forgot that pressing that button mutes everything. It's a bad button to press at the beginning of in the middle of the
No.
thing. Okay, so if you're doing a true 48-hour art check, that means that every 48 hours you're meeting, or technically you're meeting Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or every 2 days or whatever, which doesn't exactly work out because of the weekend. But you are going to ask, the first question is, what have you accomplished? What have you gotten done? What's your progress in the last since last we've met? The next question is, what was hard? What was challenging? What your obstacles? What got in your way? And then the third question is, what are your plans before we meet again? And so, what are you going to accomplish? And the thing that I like about each one of these is each one of them speaks to a different part of the creative process. And a lot of this is based off of a lot of the books that we've read and our own personal experience. I have found in anything that is difficult to maintain, whether that be art or working out or eating or whatever, like it's really easy to do really passive things. It's super easy to go out to fast food every day or watch television when I get home or whatever, because those are really passive. I'm receiving that. But anything where I'm creating or I'm active or I'm doing something to increase or make the world better or make myself better or something along those lines, that's when it gets hard. And so in the back of your mind, if you know that you have to account for your time and your progress, that will always be in the back of your mind. And there have been countless times that both Josh and I have experienced this, where it's like, sometimes you're just tired. Sometimes you're beat.
Yeah.
Sometimes you blow a tire on the freeway. You get beat up at work all day or whatever. Crazy stuff happens. You're sick. Your kids are whatever. And then in the back of your mind, you just go, you know what though? I need to do something because I'm going to have to say something tomorrow or today or something.
Yeah, and it's weird because it's not like we have like this massive audience that we're accountable to. I mean, we do have a slowly building little army that I think we're really appreciative of. Adam, I hope you're still in the chats. But it's like everybody who shows up in the chats, like, keep us going. It feels like a community that's building. However, it's like it's just the fact that and this is why I recommend, if you're going to do the 48-hour art check, pick a buddy, and preferably like somebody you respect the work of too, because like to me, like, I really like Cory's work. I'm stoked about everything he's working on. So not only am I like, I do feel like I need to show something, because there's a little bit of a almost like friendly competition to it. At the same time, I also want to be a cheerleader for what you're doing, because I think you're a really good artist. So it's like, I think it is important that you pick someone. It doesn't have to be someone doing the same thing you're doing, but pick someone who's a creative or has creative ambitions that are something you want to cheerlead and move forward. Because it's like, so that to me has been really fundamental in enabling me to be more productive. So I guess that answers the accountability thing. It's like a reverse AA, where it's like, if art is our alcohol, we're a group that's encouraging you to keep doing it.
Yeah.
And that gets into the second question, which is when you're tackling creative endeavors, not only is it hard to stay consistent with it and stay at it, and so that's where accountability comes into factor, but the downside of accountability and trying to stay with something is the darker side of creatives, which is we are our worst enemy and worst critic. And so a lot of the time when you're making art, you need to be able to have someone to listen to your challenges, for one thing. Because if you're just dealing with these weird little, man, I had everything set up on my artboard, I was ready to go, I had my kid down to sleep, and then I didn't have artist tape,
Right.
That kind of thing can throw off the whole system of this rigid habit building that you have to do to get these things done. And to have someone to just to be able to publicly say, like, this was the challenge, this is how I overcame it. um, it not only functions like therapeutically for the person who's doing it, because they're not alone in that struggle, but on the same note, it also functions therapeutically for the listener, at least for me, because it's like, then I'm also hearing I'm not the only, like, this is a struggle, like the
Yeah.
whole thing is a struggle, and you're not alone in the struggle. And it's kind of a reminder of that too. And then I think for viewers, like, and the people who come back and watch 48 hour check, um, it also functions to kind of show them, like, that this process is not like cut and dry, where it's like, he felt inspiration and then he was in the museum with his art. It's like,
Yeah.
there is a really long, tedious process to making this stuff, and challenges that have to be overcome by everyone of all walks of life. And so, like, I hope I'm phrasing that right, but I think that would be the biggest benefit of the challenges.
Yeah.
Not only, yeah,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was just going to say there's a lot, I think, with that I've begun to understand about articulating. Because I'll be honest, at first, you were the one that said, we could talk about this and this and this, and it was like right off the top of your head. At least that's the way I remember it the next morning when I wrote it down. Which is dangerous. I shouldn't have gone to bed without writing it down. But anyway, the next morning I was like, what did he say? And it was those three things. That the second one, I'm talking about our challenges. I thought, I don't. I have made a point in my life to focus on the positive and to not be a whiner and to not complain about things, and I want to be a solution, not a problem, right? And
Yeah,
so I was very skeptical of this step. I have found everything that you just said. It's therapeutic. And then I started thinking about two main things. One, there was a lecture that I recently attended talking about education, and they talked about making your students articulate things. So it's not just that they have to regurgitate it on a test or be able to do it, but if you explain it out loud to somebody else, it's a significantly higher cognitive involvement, and it increases something called your rich neural network. And your rich neural network is a connection of ideas and concepts that you have in your mind that allows you to learn new ideas and concepts faster and more effectively and more permanently. And the
yeah,
richer your neural network that you have, for example, if you have never touched any of the Adobe software and you learn Photoshop, that is going to be really hard. But then learning Illustrator after you learn Photoshop is going to just be hard. And then learning InDesign after you learn Illustrator and Photoshop is just going to kind of be like, oh, okay, I get it, right? Because you've developed a rich neural network within that category. And so
yeah,
one thing is that I found as a benefit for me is having to articulate it out loud. It gives it a name. It gives it a process. It almost takes some of the power away, because if I
yes,
experience on kind of a lizard brain level, a gut level, the challenges of making art, and I never articulate it, then it's this unnamed amorphous force that
yes,
is really hard to fight. But if I
yeah,
if I'm just like, dude, it was hard because, and then this happened, then I'm like categorizing it and I can see it and I'm explaining it and somebody else agrees with it and has beat it. And I see that kind of that Neil Gaiman quote that, we don't tell fairy tales because dragons are real, but we tell fairy tales because it's important to understand that you can kill dragons.
yeah,
And if I've seen that Josh has killed that same dragon that I'm now describing, it's like, well, yeah, I can do that. And then
yeah,
the second thing that comes to mind is if you haven't listened to Ink Pulp audio, you have to go back and start from the beginning. Sean Crystal, he was a SCAD professor. I've actually got right here. If you can't see my finger, but right there, that's a Sean Crystal piece. He draws Batman and other things. He's working on a Juggernaut comic right now. He
nice,
was kind of having this huge breakdown. He was seeing all these people in comics that were seemingly happy, and he was miserable. And so he's like, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a podcast where I try to figure out how they're happy and how they're productive and how they're making this work, since I'm like falling apart. And he started every single one of those podcasts talking out loud about his challenges, and listening to that was massively therapeutic to me. It was an amazing experience because what happened is over the course of a year and a half, he's not super chipper, but he has actually gotten to the point where he himself says that he's functioning much better, and you can hear it in his voice.
Yeah.
And his challenges are much more minimal. Whereas, I mean, it was true existential dread and clinical depression and actual anxiety at the start.
Yeah.
And then by the end, it's like, it's kind of hard. Finances are tight. And, it's things like his level of struggle has drastically decreased by talking to other people about it and articulating it out loud. And it actually helped me get through a lot of really hard things, listening to him articulate his challenges, because I identified with a lot of them.
Yeah. And I think the these are all really, really big things that are valuable with it. I think there's also the potential, and I don't know if we've experienced this too much, but the nice thing about like having another creative in the conversation is sometimes you might face a challenge that you have no freaking clue how to deal with.
Right.
And part of just articulating it also creates the spitballing factor. The idea of like kind of throwing it out there to another creative who's having similar struggles. And because the act of creativity does have a lot of commonalities, regardless of whether you're trying to write, whether you're trying to, honestly, just outside of creative, just trying to do anything to better yourself. There are really similar challenges. And so somebody else who's in the fight, saying like, hey, I got this battle, I don't really know what tactic to take. That also allows, because like let's say you have that challenges part and you hit this thing where you're like, I didn't get over it, like I'm still figuring it out.
Right.
You have another voice in the room that maybe has been through it and can give you a solution, or at least just articulating it can help you as a creative who's boiling. Like, we're creatives, we're problem solvers. So, the more, like you were talking about with that animation, it's like once you start those gears going, you start seeing potential solutions and potential ways to correct and to kind of solve whatever the issue is. So it also allows that, where it's like it gets another voice to kind of to help get through those challenges if they are like stifling, like they're literally putting a pause on your creative outflow. And so that's a huge thing too. So we should did we get that one mostly?
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's other benefits, but I think just for a cap of what this thing's about, I think that would be one of them. I would say, what's the last?
The last part is what you're planning on doing. What you're planning on doing in the next 48 hours, and I find this really fascinating because I do not like setting goals. I am very much a work hard towards a direction kind of vector style of person, rather than like, I'm going to achieve these milestones. But what I found is I typically will set a single major goal, right? I'm going to say, I'm going to finish this children's book, right? That's a huge 6-month process. But what this nails down is, I often find in those situations that I'm working really hard, but I'm not necessarily thinking about what is the most important thing that I need to do next. I'm just working hard, and I will often find that I've gone off into the woods and a bunch of that work wasn't necessary. So just saying, okay, what do I need to do in the next 48 hours? Or what do I need to do this week? Or what do I need to do tomorrow? Or what do I need to do after this phone call? That's a really important process to kind of process out loud, because it helps take that 1,000-mile journey and you figure out the next 3 steps, and if you can figure that out, you can do it. And then the other thing is, if you're like the two of us, and you tell another human being that you're going to do something, there's a level of accountability there, and if I have to show up again in 2 days and say, well, I know I said I was going to do this, but instead I played 7 hours of video games, that's less likely to happen, because I know I will at least get done the things that I said I was going to get done before I pick up that controller.
Yeah, and
Because
I've seen other iterations of this, like Jan and Ox were doing one. I think they're still going, but I know that like their thing was if you failed to meet your goal,
yeah,
they made it a little gamble there. So it's like if you fail to make the goal, like you get to basically tell the other person to draw something. So it's like if you don't get your goal, you're loading yourself with more work, which
yeah,
is
they
a
had built
really interesting.
penalties into it, which is
Yeah,
awesome. It was great.
yeah. What's interesting to me is I think because Corey and I are very similar personalities, like we don't give each other too much of a hard time when we don't hit it. But you'll notice, like, and this is kind of cool. I wouldn't have even known we could say this, but I think our dedication to kind of our word shows through this show because if you watch, there's only like one or two episodes in like 80 where like one of us is like, yeah, I didn't hit it.
Right.
You know, that's actually been a really rare thing.
Yeah.
And the response is usually like, well, that's understandable, you know, because like
Right.
there's a lot of crazy stuff. But
Yeah.
what's weird is just the moment of having to go, I did set out a goal, I didn't hit it. It's, I think that in itself is just, to me, like such a non fun thing to say
Right.
that it keeps me driven. So it's I think it functions on multiple ends and it ties into the first question where it provides accountability, which is why it's important that it's frequent. However, so let's get into did we miss anything about that last bit other than the biggest part of it that's the most important is it creates results.
Yeah.
So so that's the best part about that third question because by naming it you're now taking that first potential step and getting it done. So it's like it's a little pre-thinking.
And there's a huge amount of people often ask, how do you stay motivated or how do you find the inspiration to do it? And it's like, first, motivation follows work. Like if you do work and you achieve something, you're motivated to do more work because you achieve something. And
Yes.
so if you're on this like endless death march of I'm going to become a better artist, like, well, you're never going to reach that, right? You will become better,
Yeah.
but you're never going to get to the point where you've achieved betterness. But if you're like, in the next 2 days I'm going to do this, and then you come back and you get to say out loud publicly, hey, I did that. That is motivating, and I'm going to keep doing that. And that's been an interesting cycle,
Yeah.
is being able to do that. So I think each one of these questions we could do like a whole episode on because there's a lot
Yeah,
to it.
yeah.
But
So
oh, go ahead.
let's tie it off with just kind of giving people a little bit of like I mean it's weird, it almost sounds like a sales pitch. That wasn't our intention, but still we do want more people involved in this. So there's a couple things I want to get into. I think one would be like a few tips, just really short tips on for people who want to do it. I have one that just stands out like a red light, and that's to whatever way you do it as a stream. Do it
Yeah.
as something that's going to require minimal work because it will wear on you if it requires like too much. And we were aware of this from the get-go, like that this could potentially be disastrous. And because we're both so long-winded, we even built in time limits and stuff like that.
Which we
We're
usually
trying
just
to
completely
kinda,
ignore.
yes, but we're trying to kind of work with,
Right.
with what we have to kind of minimize the amount of commitment to this part because the goal is the art.
Yeah.
And I will say it hasn't been as much of a drain as like doing like 100 days challenges,
Right.
where it's like you're really having to kind of build. So, and a lot of that's thanks to Cory and automating it. But I would encourage until we're able to kind of put these assets up for everybody, which is one of our goals. Like until that's available, you don't have to wait and have assets or like have a split screen. You can just literally do this as a Google Hangout
Yeah.
and ask those questions and it just turn a timer on your phone and there you go. So that's one thing I'd say, because I have seen people bit by that because it's hard to sustain. I'd also say do it 48 because I think it's less stressful than trying to punch it all into a week.
Yeah.
Because then a week, your memory's less clear of what you got done. And not only that, but like the commitment is going to feel more intense because it's only once a week. Whereas with us, if we have an off 48-hour art check, we got one in 2 days.
Right. And I would second both of those. I'll start with the 48 hours thing. For me, failing within a 48-hour period is a minor setback. But failing for a week is a major setback. And if your failures are minimized, you still experience them, but they feel like a stumble rather than a trip and fall and a broken arm.
Agreed.
And for me, if I remember deciding when we were first talking about this whether we were going to how the frequency of it. We talked about a month, we talked about a week, we talked about daily, we talked about every other day. Daily seemed way too much. And for me, I know what I would have done with a week. I would have crammed, if we did it every Friday night, I would have crammed all of my work into Thursday evening.
Yeah.
And I probably would have pulled an all-nighter. And that would be to avoid the failure of I haven't done anything for 7 days.
Yeah.
But I can miss a 24-hour period and still pull a procrastination. Oh, we're going to do it, in a few hours. And so I can get a few hours in.
Yeah.
And that doesn't feel like a failure because I can still get stuff done. And it's still like, if you take a day off every once in a while, that's not a big deal. But if you take a week off, like I kind of did during Thanksgiving, it is rough to come back from.
Yeah.
And so I'd say that. And then to the streaming thing, streaming is way easier than you think. It's way easier than you think, and I think there's some benefits. Everything that Josh said is a huge benefit. Also, we have awesome people that we've gotten to know that watch these videos and listen to these podcasts. There are people that I had a really rough one the other day where it was really hard, and one of the guys, Tim, actually came to my Instagram and reached out, and it was really awesome. And so doing this publicly and doing it live, there's something about that that I think if anything becomes too familiar, it becomes less urgent. And I think that if it was just you and I on a phone call, and I'm not doing it live, and I literally don't know who's going to show up, but I know that there are people expecting me, I could probably phone that in. And I bet you both of us could, at times be like, let's just call each other. Let's just skip it. Let's just call each other in a couple days. But because it's a show, it's scheduled, we have an audience, whatever size that audience is, that expects us to do it. There are several major pieces of motivation to continue doing that because of that expectation, because of the other people that are involved. You feel like people are counting on you and things like that. But it's not so giant that there have been probably 3 or 4 times where we've just said, let's do it tomorrow. And we still do it. But but for the most part, we do it on time and we do it at the same time. And there's some huge parts of that. And as far as streaming goes, what I have set up is way more complicated than you need to do. It's not that hard, but it was time consuming. But literally, if you just go on Google or you just go on YouTube and you press that little button in the upper right hand corner and go live and then invite somebody into the chat, or you go into Gmail and you do a video chat and then you just stream the video chat. There's a couple different ways to do it, and if you Google it, you'll know how to do it in 2 minutes. You're live. And if you've got a YouTube channel and you're live, that's it. That's all you need. It announces it to all your followers. It's at the top of the list when they look at their subscriber tab every single time. And so there's a lot of reasons to stream and go live. And I would say that's probably one of the biggest secrets. When I was doing podcasts 5 years ago and I tried to incorporate live chat and a lot of this stuff, the technology just wasn't there. You had to have people phone in and then you record it and you try to play it back. And it just, But now you can have people that are in the chat and they say stuff and you can respond. And so there's a real audience connection. And our conversations are better because of the community that is here, that little army of people that are showing up and listen to this while they draw or jump in
Yeah.
to back or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, and it always enriches the conversation. There's another byproduct to streaming too, which is, as creatives, and this is another, support for just doing the whole 48-hour art check in general. As creatives, we, especially in animation or in cartooning, where it's very much like an isolated space, and it's important for it to be an isolated space because it requires focus and it requires a lot of time at the drawing table or a lot of time like on After Effects just plugging away or a lot of time at the screen. And so one of the other byproducts of this is it this is a little bit of like a bullpen situation,
Yeah.
simulation, I guess, where it's like you are you're basically, you're having a hangout. And that's kind of great too, on multiple levels because it like for instance, a byproduct of this, aside from just creating content and getting further to my goals, is like, I feel like when Cory and I met in person, it was like this is a really good friend that I'm really invested in just as a person. And so it's like when we met in person, it was just like, oh, dude, like first there's a lot of people who, if I met online or whatever, I would feel a little nervous meeting. But like with you, I was like, I know Cory. Like, it's weird, but it's like you do have that byproduct of also kind of building a friendship. And aside from that, also like part of why we go over is like we get to have these rad conversations about art and philosophy and the creation and what we're doing. And to me, that in itself is a good reminder of like a good thing to keep that passion for this whole thing going too, because it's really easy to kind of just get lost in the grind and then kind of forget why you're doing this thing in the first place. So like to me, that's a huge byproduct too, where it's like you get some engaging conversations because inevitably, we're all fans of what we're doing, not maybe our own stuff, but of the process and of the medium. So geeking out about it, talking about some of the process, talking about some of the cogs, really does kind of make you like, okay, I'm pumped. Like usually on a day like today where I couldn't get to the drawing table, I have very little difficulty going from an art check to like getting my art done for the night.
Yeah.
Because I feel a little bit of that boost, whatever it is. So yeah.
Yeah, and I would agree. And before we met in person, we had somewhere between 40 and 60 hours worth of conversations.
Yeah.
Which is unusual.
You don't have with everyone,
Right.
Like even people, in person, like you don't usually have those kind of sustained conversations. So it's just, I can't, like there have been a few times through it, and I know Cory too, where we've been like, are we nuts for doing this? Because it's a lot of time, it's like, it's hard to commit to this kind of thing. But every time I've had even a doubt like that, I think about just the art I've gotten done, or the times where like I got home and I was like, I am beat, I'm not going to do it. And then I was like, but I got an art check, so I got to do my art.
Yeah.
It is kind of working. And so like, to me that, that in itself, like, it's just kind of proof of it, like that it's not easy for us to do this all the time, but it's also super fun and it's something to look forward to, and it helps get the art done. And so it's like, I don't know, across the board, I want to see more people do it. But if you're going to do it, make sure you try to arrange it in a sustainable way.
Yeah.
Because we have seen some people fizzle out, and I don't blame them, and I think a lot of them did the weekly format, which we've explained earlier, back it up, and you can see why we think it's probably harder to do the weekly format for multiple reasons. But yeah. Yeah, there you go. So that's kind of our pitch for the 48-hour art check. I think the overall result that both of us would harp on it for is results, in the sense of like, you're gonna see projects get done, and then you'll finish them, and you'll be like, dude, what do I do next? Because if we're keeping this thing going, I got to have a project.
Yeah.
And it's going to be that driver that forces you to not be like, I'll kind of half start this and half start that. Like, I think it's a good driver to kind of get results, because you want to show results.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So if you would like to do your own 48-hour art check, let us know, and leave us a comment on this video, or you can contact us on the website. And basically, the rules are you're going to find I hate this term, but one of our guests coined it, an accountability buddy. I still don't like that term, but find somebody else who's doing something.
Term.
Find somebody else who's doing something, and then meet with them and ask each other what you've accomplished since last you've met. What was hard about that, and how you overcame it, and what you're planning on doing, and that's it. So it's just those three things, and schedule it out. Make sure that it's scheduled and that it's expected, and you'll plan around it. And those that you love and live with will also understand that this is something that is part of your process, and you plan around. And if you want to see Josh's stuff and what he's working on and reporting on in the art check, you can go to quarterlystories.com, and you can see this awesome page develop on his Instagram channel as well. And if you'd like to see my stuff, I've recently put up a poster, and I am now currently working on an animation that I'm going to redo the bumper animations for my YouTube channel. You can go to kuretake.com. You're currently on my channel right now, and so go ahead and hit that subscribe button and that bell to kind of watch me do this 18 days. I'll be doing a video every day. And we'll see you guys on Monday.
Word.